Gary Hall Jr. is a longtime supporter of SDRI, and we're just so grateful for his time this evening. He's a 10-time Olympic medalist swimmer and a diabetes advocate, but has never let diabetes get in his way of achieving his dreams. And he's not only been a role model for others living with type 1 diabetes, just by way of example, he's also dedicated himself as a strong advocate for people with type 1 diabetes. Gary, we're just so grateful for you to be here this evening, and I just would love to welcome you to our group. Thanks so much.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, if you want to get started, I think we're good to go.
Sure. Where do we start?
At the beginning is always the best place. If you want to share a little bit about your history and your story about swimming and diabetes, I think it's just such an inspirational story.
Sure. So, born into a swimming family. My father was a famous swimmer. He swam in 3 Olympics, carried the flag for the United States in the Olympic Games. The only other swimmer to do that is Michael Phelps. He held 10 world records, was World Swimmer of the Year twice. And that was my father's side. My mother was a swimmer. She met my father at a swim meet at a swimming pool that my grandfather built. He was a collegiate champion in the 40s after World War II when they didn't have the Olympic Games. So that was the fastest swim meet in the world at the time. His son, my maternal uncle, was on the 1976 Olympic team with my father. And so I've got swimmers from both sides of the family tree. And I'm the oldest of 6. Everybody swam. And it was just something that we did recreationally, and we were watermen, a lot of time on boats and in the ocean, spearfishing and surfing and diving, and it's just something that I can't remember learning how to swim. I think I knew when I learned how to walk, and so. Grew up, was never really committed to trying to follow in my father's footsteps, and didn't join a year-round swimming program until the summer after my 8th grade year, going into high school. And then it was all in after that. And so really kind of jumped in and started doing 2 practices a day all through high school. And 4 years of that, I was college scholarship, full ride to the University of Texas in Austin, an incredible swimming program. Eddie Reese is regarded as one of the best swim coaches that the sport has ever seen. I enjoyed that time in Austin, but I didn't feel like it was right for me. I went back to Phoenix, which is where I had grown up, and started developing a training program of my own, and had some success with it. The summer after my freshman year, I qualified for the World Championships. And made the United States national team, and climbed my way through the ranks. I did well at those World Championships, went to the Pan American Games, Pan Pacific Games, and then the 1996 Olympics came along, and they were in Atlanta. So the last time the Olympics were held in the United States, home court advantage is a thing. It was really incredible to experience, because even though I grew up with my father being this famous Olympian, I had the opportunity in 1984 to go to the games in LA, and got to experience kind of what the Olympic see what the Olympic movement was. And so to be part of that and experience it for myself, qualifying for that team was really remarkable. Mostly because nobody joins the swim team to achieve fame and fortune. And the odds of you making an Olympic team are so small that you hope, you dream, but you can't count on that. And so, I was able to do that. I won 2 gold medals in relays at those games and 2 silver medals in the 50 and the 100-meter freestyle, the sprint events. And got second behind the world record holder and reigning Olympic champion, a guy by the name of Alex Popov, by the slightest of margins. And I wasn't disappointed. Best times, I felt like I didn't, mess up, but I fell a little bit short of the gold medal, and wanted to change that silver medal into a gold medal in the 2000 Olympics. Set to work, training harder than I ever had before. And about a year and a half out of the next Olympic Games in Sydney, 2000, I started experiencing all the classic symptoms of type 1 diabetes. And that went on for a while until I collapsed. I was diagnosed, general practitioner, family doctor. I took a blood sugar reading, and was, not registering on the little handheld glucose device that he had. He said, get over to see the endocrinologist right away. Set up an appointment that afternoon. And I asked him, I said, what does this mean for my swimming? He says, it's not good. This can't, I talked to the endocrinologist, but, you should be thinking about, kidney function, not losing your feet, that type of stuff. And so that was scary, very. And I went to the endocrinologist later that afternoon, was diagnosed. He was walked into the room, said, you have type 1 diabetes, see the nurse practitioner at the end of the hall, and was pivoting to exit the room. And I was like, wait. I swam in the last Olympics. I'm trying to change silver into gold. And he said, you can forget about it. This is, it's just not possible. And that was it. That was it. I was just, shell-shocked. Any family who's been through that diagnosis knows that you got a lot of questions and not enough answers. And I didn't know anything about diabetes. I didn't have any family that had type 1 or type 2. So it was out of the blue, and it took some time to wrap my head and arms around what that was going to mean for me. Certainly there was no assurance that I would be able to get back to the sport and continue doing what I loved to do, what I had invested so much of my time and energy into doing for the majority of my life up to that point. So, it wasn't until after that time away, I connected with Dr. Ann Peters, who I love Ann Peters. She just, her influence, I think anybody in athletics recognizes her as one of the leaders in how to manage diabetes in sport and physical activity. And so I was so fortunate to have been able to connect with her. My father was an ophthalmologist. He had seen the complications in retinopathy in so many patients. And so it was through his network and asking around that he was able to find Ann. And it's a neat story because I was living in Phoenix at the time. Ann was in LA, and I got on a Southwest flight. I fly over for my appointment, and the flight was delayed. And the appointment was like the end of the day, right before the office was like closing. And I show up like an hour late and just apologizing profusely. And I'm so sorry. She was it was hard to get an appointment to see her. And she said, I explained that I'd flown out to see her. She said, are you spending the night? I said, well, I was just planning on flying back after the appointment. And she said, come with me. I've got a lecture across town. And she, following her at this hurried pace down to the parking garage, we jump in this red VW Beetle, and we're driving down the Santa Monica freeway. and she's asking me all the questions that she would have been asking, like in the waiting room, and by the time we were pulling into the parking lot at her lecture, she said, "Yeah, let's give it a try. I think maybe we can do this." And it was such a different response from, "No, this can't be done. It's impossible. It's never been done before." That was a huge motivation for me. That approach, just that willingness to try. Like, hey, let's try. And so I can't give Anne enough credit or enough love for the support and being there and shared that accomplishment of going back to the Olympic Games in Sydney. I swam faster than I had ever swum prior to the diagnosis at the Olympic trials and qualifying for those games, and won 4 more medals at the Sydney Olympics, including a gold in the 50-meter freestyle, which determines the world's fastest swimmer. So it was pretty neat. I felt like it's a tremendous honor to represent the United States of America, but to represent all people with diabetes too. That was an additional support system that I felt. Definitely cognizant of behind the starting blocks of those games, and a great motivator in both the training and the performance.
Wow. How do I follow up with anything after that? Gary, it's just such an inspiration. I think a lot of type 1s out there often feel like the narrative is you can't do that now that you have diabetes. And so it's just such an inspiration to really marginalize that rhetoric and start a new narrative that you can look at me. And that's just, I love that aspect of your story. Can you talk a little bit about diabetes management during competitions and then also training? How did you handle blood sugars, before CGMs with all of this? And how did you just manage the success of your swimming with the glucose control?
Sure. The dark ages. I hear, talking 1999, it doesn't seem that long ago to me, but, the NPH insulin, with these huge spikes, and you had to eat, this when it would peak, and if you didn't have your lunch at just the right time, it was these terrible lows, and so it was a lot more difficult to manage at the time with the insulins, and there were figure sticks, and just having to do that on competition days. I would test at least 20 times in a day. Trying to get just a very compromised effect of a CGM, what that offers today. I wish that I had the technologies, the insulins that are available today, and a CGM too. It was a game changer. But at that time too, 2000 was really kind of the first real widespread push for pumps. The pumpers, they were like zealots. They were out to change everybody, get everybody on a pump, And I remember, everybody saying, "Oh, well, you just unplug your pump while you're exercising," and stuff. And there was a lot of bad advice. And I think it was just, new technology. There was very, very, very little available about addressing exercise and diabetes. It was really, really hard to come by information, and others who were managing it at that time. Not a lot of organization addressing it, and so a lot of trial and error, and a lot of error, in figuring that out. And this was a crash course in just not just carb counting, but what is the difference between aerobic and anaerobic exercise on your blood sugar levels? And then how do you explain these spikes with competition? That completely came out of, I just didn't understand. Nobody sat me down before I experienced these adrenaline and stress-related episodes of the competition fight. And so just having to learn that on my own and just figure it out. It was definitely a process, but after the success, then I was able to come into contact with other people who had been dealing with this, in their own isolated silos, and compare notes. And just so appreciative that there are groups out there now, and a lot more literature and so many more incredible examples of athletes that are just doing phenomenal, inspiring things despite type 1 diabetes.
That's incredible. Was Dr. Peters, did you work with her like on a weekly basis, or how often did you communicate with her to make adjustments so you could still continue your, highly rigorous competitive schedule?
Well, I was training in Berkeley at the time, and she flew up to go to my first swim practice back after a diagnosis, and was there on the pool deck in Berkeley for my first practice. And I remember just getting back in. I was kind of out of shape just from, the health stuff. I'd lost so much weight, probably 15, close to 20 pounds at the diagnosis, and hadn't been exercising for months, after, and so I was out of shape a little bit, and I get back in the pool, and, we had a game plan to start with our blood sugar levels elevated, because she anticipated that it would drop with the exercise, and she had never seen or heard of a blood sugar level dropping so quickly in such a short period of time. Swimming, you're using every muscle in your body, and so it dropped from 250 to 60 in 40 minutes, less than 40 minutes or something like that. And so she said, wow, this is intense aerobic exercise. We really need to kind of figure this out, and maybe but I had, fortunately at the time, and this is exceptional, a coach that could listen. It's a slight, in order to be a great coach, you have to kind of really believe that what's best, and it's your way or the highway. A lot of coaches kind of have that approach. And so I was really fortunate to have a coach that was willing to adapt and listen to his doctor and make changes to the training that I was doing. So we were reinventing the wheel. In so many ways, we were starting from square one, because I couldn't train any longer the way that I was accustomed to training before, the way that everybody else on the team was training, that I needed to kind of have these shorter, incremental training episodes, which actually favored my sprint. So became a lot more anaerobic focused, because as a result, which ultimately I was pushing for before I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. It was really lucky to have the two of them working together. After that, I would check in occasionally, if I was noticing patterns, that she was kind of keeping tabs on it, but definitely not on a day-to-day basis, or even a week-to-week basis. So, checking in if there was a problem. Big change was that initially our approach was start with your blood sugar level high, and know that it was going to drop. But some days you'd walk into practice and it was going to be an anaerobic set, a sprint set, and my blood sugar levels wouldn't drop, on those days. And even if it was an aerobic day and the levels did drop, there was a window where the training was effective. If my blood sugar was up over 200, I was just fatiguing easily. I was having trouble making the intervals. They were very difficult. and then it would get within a certain range, 100 to 200 range, where I would be getting something out of the training. And then, it would drop low, and I'd have to get out and get some juice, sit on the side of the pool for, 15 minutes, and then, wait for that window. So it was like everything else was not really helping. And so the big discovery that I made was that if I ate, and nobody was talking about fat and protein ratios with carbs. So I found this one product that was an omega-3 bar that had the right balance, that now people are more aware of how the protein and balance with the fast-acting carbs really kind of creates more of a plateauing effect. And so I found that these bars, platinum performance bars, I could, and I never knew, there wasn't like a written formula, like Wednesdays are aerobic days, Tuesdays are anaerobic days. You'd walk into practice and whatever coach felt like doing that day was on the board, and you didn't know until 5 minutes before you were jumping in the water what you were going to be doing. And so that was difficult for me too, when I was planning my meal, like before, and I would have to eat so that there was fuel in the tank. I'm training for 6, 7 to 8 hours a day. And so I needed the carbohydrates to get me through that really intense training. Everybody else that didn't have diabetes was carbo loading and was just eating an enormous amount of food to get through that training. And so anyway, what I figured out was that with these bars, if I walked in and I saw an aerobic set on the day, I would eat 2 of these bars, and it would create a stable, and I'd be chewing the bar as I dove into the water for practice. And when it digested at the rate that it was digesting, and when my blood sugar would otherwise be dropping because of the aerobic exercise, it created this like stable level plateau through the duration of the practice. And typically I would get a spike after the practice, within an hour after the practice. But that was so much easier than having to get out every 45 minutes to an hour to chug juice, sit there dazed for 15 minutes, and then like wait for that window to like get back into the pool and have effective training again. And so if it was an anaerobic day, I would only eat 1 of the bars. And so with that approach, that changed everything. That made the training so much more effective. And I was getting so much more out of the practices. And so that discovery was a game changer for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I have another question in terms of the carbo loading versus adjusting your insulin doses. Because I know a lot of times with heavy exercise, a lot of people will cut, like if they're on an insulin pump, they'll cut their insulin, like 3 hours beforehand to do that. How did you manage the carbo loading? Because I'm sure you also cut insulin. So how did you kind of balance that?
Yeah, I never really, after I was diagnosed, carbo loaded the way that other athletes were. It's just, I was consuming. I remember people talking about it still. There was a Michael Phelps profile piece in one of the Olympic Games where he sits down for breakfast and has a stack of pancakes from the diner table to the ceiling, and goes through some 70,000 just something ridiculous. And so that's the way swimmers eat. Nobody was really paying attention to how many carbs it was or anything like that. You just ravenous appetite, from burning that many calories in the pool. And I was never a counter anyway. My brain doesn't operate that way. I'm a right brain thinker. And so I was never good about like keeping logs. blood sugar levels and stuff like that. A lot of it was intuitive and making adjustments, and you know, and then eventually just knowing, okay, that's I need this many units for a slice of pizza. I know, you know, this many units for an English muffin. So I was just eating. I was eating healthy before the diagnosis, which included a lot of carbohydrates. I just continued eating healthy that included a lot of carbohydrates and would dose accordingly. Yeah, so my goal after that discovery of consuming carbs as I was diving into the water, you know, my target was 150 going into practice. So I would dose for lunch whatever I had accordingly, so that I'd be walking into practice 150 about C's. And then, yeah.
My next question is, if Dexcom was available at that time, would you wear it, or would the drag be detrimental to your swimming?
Yeah, I would definitely wear it. And yeah, I wish. I mean, I wish I had a time machine so that I could have gone into the future and grabbed a G6. Dexcom is the biggest game changer. And for all the, you know, some people love pumps, and I never did. I went on every single pump, and you know, I just didn't like the attachment more than anything else. And maybe it was because I was body conscious, because I was a swimmer. We shaved the hair on our fingers to get an advantage. I mean, this is like how small, you know, a single hair can make the difference. A hundredth of a second is the margin of victory a lot of times in these races. They're so close. And so I think that where I wear my sensor now is on the my backside below suit line. So I think, and you didn't have to shave anything that wasn't exposed. Yeah, I think that underneath the suit, there wouldn't have been that drag that you cut yourself shaving for that advantage.
So is Dr. Peter still your endocrinologist?
Yes.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's such a neat relationship.
And dearly.
And are you aware of any kids resources that would help a 10-year-old learn what's possible with type 1 diabetes? It's one of the questions.
You know, there are some good groups out there. Not one that I you know or recommend. You can ask me if you want, if you got questions.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And how did you deal with disappointments when diabetes management with diabetes management in sports? So was there a time where you ever were not able to compete because of blood sugar levels? And if so, how did you handle that?
Yes. So this one story is of Sydney, and it was the 4x100 medley relay, which is the last swim, the last competition in the swimming schedule at the Olympic Games. So it's the last night of competition for the swimmers, and it's the last event. And it's the best swimmer of the 100 butterfly, the best swimmer of the 100 backstroke, the best swimmer of the 100 freestyle, and the best swimmer of the 100 breaststroke. And they come together and they do the relay, and we won, gold medal, broke the world record, happy ending to a fantastic meet. And we go back, and for whatever reason, I mean, my blood sugar would spike typically for Olympic swimming competitions, like go through the roof. I mean, in such a short period of time. And for whatever reason, this one time it dropped. I don't know why, but so we finish. They gather you up, the people that won a medal. They shuffle you back. there's the medal ceremony right away. And so they put you into this room, you're reunited with your towel and flip-flops and Team USA sweats. And so I'm putting it on the stuff, everybody's happy, we're slapping each other on the backs, happy. I'm feeling fine at this point. I guess my blood sugar level is crashing at this point. And they shuttle us out to the awards podium, and they play the national anthem. And by the time I got out there, I don't remember any of it. Like, I don't remember the national anthem. I don't remember receiving the gold medal. I don't know what I was doing after because then they walk you around the pool. Procession after you've been awarded the medal, and the team manager found me passed out like underneath the bleachers in the warm down pool area. My blood sugar was 23 at that time, and so I was just like completely out of it. I was conscious enough that I was able to like drink juice, but not conscious enough to get it. Yeah, that was my scary low at the Olympic Games, and toured extensively. Talking to diabetes groups, saying this is the reality of diabetes. It's easy to look at the me on the top of the podium with the gold medal, smiling, and the national anthem playing, but there's a darker side to this as well, a really serious side, and something. This is the reason why we really need to fund research and find a cure for this disease. So, because a lot of people, will look at, oh, he's the fastest swimmer in the world. Like, oh, it's not a big deal. Like, you just give yourself a shot of insulin. That's what I spent a lot of years having to combat those perceptions.
Yeah, that's really tough. And I think you've been such a public role model, which is just such an inspiration to so many. And so I think I can speak for the whole community. We thank you for just being a role model and an advocate. Did your competitors know that you had diabetes? Did you talk to your teammates about it, or how did you navigate that?
Yeah, my teammates who I was training with, they definitely knew. My competitors knew. In fact, a lot of them had come up to me since and said, we wrote you off. Like after we heard you had been diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, we're like, oh, well, we don't have to worry about Gary anymore. And so it was hidden mostly from them. I wasn't, there was one time that I had to give myself, or I made a correction, like in the ready room, like before going out to the blocks, where I had to like pull out a vial and a syringe and give myself a shot of insulin. And that, there's doping in sport. Everybody's suspicious if you're pulling out a needle and giving yourself an injection at a sporting competition, especially people that have no idea what diabetes is, So that raised a couple of eyebrows, and I was amused by that. But I don't think most of the people knew what I was dealing with in terms of what diabetes management really looks like, what a low blood sugar looks like. Even my teammates, maybe they saw me a little bit wonky or dazed. That's nothing unusual for me. So they were like, oh, that's just normal for him. It was, there was one guy, he won the world championships in 1998. His name was Bill Pitch. And he came out and said that it wasn't fair that I had type 1 diabetes and that it was cheating. And he accused me of being a cheater because I had type 1 diabetes and that I was taking insulin. And he made those statements publicly, and he badmouthed me throughout the entire swimming community. This was a teammate and a friend. And I've never forgiven him for that. I mean, anybody that thinks that having type 1 diabetes is an advantage, at elite level sport doesn't have type 1 diabetes. So anyway, yeah. Hey, Bill, if you're out there.
Yeah, that's really tough. I'm sorry you had to go through that. You're right. They don't know. It's not an advantage in any stretch of the imagination. What advice would you have for kids in general that are either newly diagnosed and, you know, maybe feel inhibited by their diabetes, or have lived with it a long time, but still feel like it's stopping them from achieving their dreams?
Well, to newly diagnosed kids, I'm telling them that, listen, if you never ever had to brush your teeth, and then all of a sudden at the age of 14, somebody says, here's something called a toothbrush, and here's something called toothpaste, and you have to do this every single day, a couple times a day. You would be like, this is the worst thing in the world. Brushing your teeth, who's ever heard of such a, this is awful, you know, like what a responsibility, what a burden. I gotta brush my teeth. But, you know, if you're doing it every single day, day in, day out, a couple times a day for all of your life, you can do it in your sleep. You know, you in the middle of the night, you get up and do it in the dark. You know, if you have to. And so I think it's just eventually the diabetes management, so much of it becomes that automatic, brainless brushing your teeth. It's just part of the routine. It's washing your hands after going to the bathroom. Nobody complains about that, about being a terrible inconvenience. That's what diabetes management looks like a lot of the time. Most of the time. And, you know, the other times it can be terrible, and burnout is real. We get tired of it, and it's frustrating, you know, that you don't pass out if you don't brush your teeth, you know, you get cavities or something like that, but there are consequences. And then, you know, for people, the second part of the question was, what do I say to kids
that feel maybe, you know, that have lived with diabetes for a while, but feel like they can't achieve their dreams because of the diabetes?
Well, gosh, I think it was Winston Churchill who said, like, in defeat, defiance. And, you know, when you get frustrated with diabetes, defy it by, you know, putting it back in its place and not letting it stop you. You know, face your challenges, and face your fears, and that's what champions do. You know, it's not that they aren't experiencing fear, they're mastering their fear, and you know, mastering their frustrations. And so diabetes management isn't always easy. I understand that. I'm not saying it's no big deal, you know, I'm not saying that. That's not the message here. I'm just saying, don't give up. Don't give up. Defy diabetes. And if you're able to do that, you don't have to win a gold medal at the Olympic Games. You can inspire other people. The people that inspired me when I was first diagnosed, they didn't win the Olympic Games. It was an older guy that was a master swimmer that I was friends with who came up and said, I've had type 1 diabetes for 30 some years. Haven't let it stop me. And he wasn't fast or anything like that. I just never knew that this guy who I'd known for a long time had type 1 diabetes. You know, he wasn't letting it stop him from living the life he wanted to live. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to go back doing the same thing I was doing before the diagnosis. And so don't forget that each one of you have the ability to inspire others. And that's simply just taking care of yourself, not letting diabetes stop you, and going out and living life to the fullest.
That is such an important message. I'm all fired up now. It's like, it's great to hear that. I think our youth need to definitely hear that. I mean, back when you were diagnosed, when I was diagnosed, when many of us were diagnosed, this was before social media. This was before people really knew about diabetes. And I know that you have become such a big advocate along your journey. Can you talk to us and tell the group a little bit about your role in advocacy and what you've done?
Yeah, so I went 3 months after I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes to the very first Children's Congress in '99. And that was JDRF's first effort. Like, they had some presence on Capitol Hill. You know, they were meeting with policymakers and securing funding from government. But that has become such an important movement. And so to see that was the first time that I really did some public speaking on diabetes. And I remember not doing a very good job of it. I remember talking to this big group of kids and comparing diabetes to a bully, and how if we all, you know, stick together, that we can, you know, we don't have to be bullied. Something like that. But that was the beginning of my advocacy efforts. And that was a long time ago. And it's neat to see how I've been back several times to the Children's Congress event. But I continued. You know, I took a year off after each Olympic Games that I competed in, '96, 2000, 2004. Certainly after 2000, I went on the diabetes circuit. And I feel like I went to every JDRF chapter, all these, every backdoor tour of research organizations, seeing what was happening in the labs. And that was so rewarding for me because, one, obviously connecting with so many families that are passionate and doing all the black tie events and the walks and you know, bike rides and stuff like that. I walked so many miles. I feel like I went to almost every single chapter across the country, and just did that nonstop for years, and it was inspiring for me. You know, it was rewarding. It was exhausting. I remember, you know, the window after the Olympic Games and the year after the Olympics, I was going 3 or 4 different cities in a week, and not taking a break for, you know, a solid year doing that, and just being exhausted. That it was just so depleting too. I mean, just you know, so I did a lot of that. You know, the research part was really inspiring, provided me with a lot of hope too. I got a lot out of that. Met brilliant researchers, geniuses, right? That were doing, so they dedicated their lives to these laboratory pursuits that I had no recognition, you know, of prior to a diagnosis, you know, no awareness that how committed these people were. But also what struck me too through that time was how infrequently a lot of the researchers would come across the grassroots patient. And so I felt like it was a great opportunity to be thanking these people who had been spending, you know, the last 20 years looking through a microscope, and say, hey, I'm representing all the people with diabetes out there. Good job. Like, keep up the good work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Because they didn't hear that. Too often there was a disconnect between the researcher and the patient. And so kind of establishing that bridge was an important motivator for me in the advocacy work that I was doing. And then I climbed the ranks, served on the government relations committee for JDRF out of the national organization. And that's the advocacy group now. They changed the name from government relations committee. But spent a lot of time in DC working with policymakers and elected officials from both sides. Diabetes doesn't discriminate one party or the other. So everybody's affected by diabetes somehow. And just was always inspired by that work. It is, second the wheels touched down at the airport, in Washington, D.C., and I feel like I'm here to change the world. Like, like you go and, just to Capitol Hill with just such passion, that what we're doing here just makes a difference. And it's just a lot of fun to be part of and connect with other people that were as passionate as I was about the research and about the advocacy work. And then, also was unexpected. So I immediately was kind of embraced by the diabetes community because of what I was doing in sport. But the sports medicine world approached me, and they were like, "Hey, we don't know how you did it. You got to explain this to us." And so I found this partner in the American College of Sports Medicine, and started working with these brilliant people. And it was a huge problem there because for all the efforts of the diabetes advocates, there were still at the sporting level. Like I said, when I was diagnosed, there were very few books really addressing diabetes management in sport and physical activity. And, at the youth sport level, a lot of times it's a volunteer coach. It's some kid on the team, his parent who played baseball, that takes up the baton of coaching and is passionate about it and means well and everything like that. But no medical training, didn't go to medical school, 99.9999% of the time, these volunteer coaches. And so when they find out that Timmy has type 1 diabetes and he could pass out, they don't want to discriminate, but they hear that and they're scared. Timmy's a liability. That's the way they see it. Somebody who's done it, this is all new to me. Passing out sounds scary. And so a lot of times the kid that had diabetes was very politely placed on the bench and invited to the pizza party. Didn't see any playing time, I would hear these stories from so many people through all of these travels and diabetes events that I was attending, and just heartbreaking stuff about discrimination against people with diabetes, especially in sport. And that's something that I really got involved with. And so I co-authored the consensus statement on youth sport for the International Olympic Committee, a guidebook to all federations under the Olympic movement from all countries. So within the United States Olympic Committee, there's USA Baseball, there's USA Swimming, there's USA Volleyball. So this filters down to every single sport and every single youth coach. And so I didn't go to medical school. It's not qualified really to be, but I was working with brilliant people who were qualified that did enough editing that I was at least listed on these publications, and on how these coaches should address the management of chronic conditions in sport and physical activity. And that was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. I continued to serve on the board for the National Youth Sport Health and Safety Institute. And again, my area of focus is chronic conditions in sport and physical activity. How do we do away with discrimination? And how do we create equal opportunity for all participants in sport, including those with diabetes? So that's something that I'm really passionate about. I can still continue. I was just exchanging emails today with the chairman and CEO of the American College of Sports Medicine and National Youth Sport Health and Safety Institute. So that work continues, and it's all very rewarding for me, something that I'm very passionate about.
Wow, that is such an incredible list of just programs and institutions and groups that you've been a part of to really push the needle.
If I don't want to omit the most important one, that's Dr. David Kerr. He's listed among one of those so important thought leaders in this space, and how we get people involved in exercising and moving. This is good for anybody, not just people with type 1 diabetes or type 2 diabetes. Thank you, Doctor, for your continued involvement in the space.
Gary, you are an inspiration, and it's a joy to work with you. So just thank you for that. Katie, I've got to say, Gary, you have to tell the shark story tonight.
I've told that story so many times.
I don't think...
I punched a shark that bit my sister. That's the short version of it. If a shark ever bites your sister, it's okay to punch it. I'm typically not a violent man, but the occasion called for it. We were spearfishing, and it was going after a fish that we had speared, and bit 19 stitches in my sister's arm. And there was a little scuffle. I have to say, I punched a shark several times, and it really didn't seem to affect it very much. I was lucky to get away with all my fingers. But adventures, I mentioned it earlier, we're a family of watermen.
I love that story. It's so incredible, just to bring it back to the advocacy. JDRF is just a well-oiled machine on Capitol Hill, and we're so grateful for those institutions. And from those big ones to the small ones like Sansom Diabetes Research Institute. Just so you guys know, if you're not aware, Dr. Kerr, who joined us on the call, he runs our type 2 programs in terms of looking at ethnicity and how that is affected in the pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. But more importantly, what has been Gary alluded to, that is not only just for the type 2, but also the type 1, is the food as medicine concept. He's really revolutionized how food impacts our diabetes management, and how that can replace for type 2 a lot of the pharmaceuticals that are on the market. And it's just been so great for SDRI to be a part of that groundbreaking research with Dr. Kerr leading the pack with that. And so we're just so grateful that on our own turf, we're making some great progress too, and it deeply impacts our community. And so we're forever grateful for the giants in the diabetes field that really do blaze that path before us. So Gary, yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up. I also wanted to ask you a little bit about, have you had the opportunity to mentor any up and coming type 1 swimmers?
I've come across some, yeah. I've connected with some that have reached high levels, collegiate swimming level. And there is an Olympian from Brazil that has type 1 diabetes, that is an incredible swimmer. So a bit here or there. And so I have to say that after I retired from swimming, I kind of threw myself into the world of diabetes, and I had 2 young children. And so being a parent and work became a focus, and so I stepped away from swimming for a long time. After probably 10 years away, where I was raising kids and working, I had my agent, my sports agent from when I was competing, had started this swim clinic business. And I said, Dave Arluck is his name. I said, Dave, sign me up for a couple clinics. It'd be fun to get back on a pool deck. It's been a long time. And so I started doing these swim clinics and just loved it right away. I mean, just working with kids and I was really, really enjoying it. And I wasn't doing a lot of them, but every clinic that I would go to, there'd be a swimmer with diabetes. Maybe 2 swimmers. Like the longer time that the clinic was promoted, the more number of swimmers with diabetes would be showing up. And then I was noticing that there's more and more kids with diabetes showing up. And now in a group of 60, maybe 10 of them have diabetes, and not all of them were even swimmers. Like some of them, that kid's not even a swimmer. He's a baseball player with type 1 diabetes. And so I taught him how to do some backstroke or something, but I realized too that, that there's a great need to connect with young athletes with type 1 diabetes. And so, yeah, I've conceptualized a diabetes swim series where I would kind of do these swim clinics in these kind of traditional swim settings and have a morning session that's dedicated to athletes with type 1 diabetes. And then an afternoon session with type 2 diabetes athletes with type 2, or water aerobics for a class for people that needed to start exercising. And so I'm talking to Dexcom about pulling together like a 10-city tour after COVID settles down. Next summer is the Olympics that's happening in Tokyo. There may not be an audience, fans in the seats, but they're definitely proceeding with that. So coinciding with, the Olympics next summer, and looking to do a diabetes swim series that would help connect athletes with type
1. Wow, that's incredible. That would just be such a neat resource for the type 1 community, and something that just has never been done. And so that's that community, I mean, just bringing it back to that, is truly the grassroots efforts that you alluded to before as well. And so it's just, it's so important.
And, we all play a part. We all play a part, and it takes a village, really, to accomplish all that, we are doing in the diabetes world today. And so just, we all do what we can. And, happy to be part of this group, be part of this community, and lend support however I'm able.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. Do you wear any fitness trackers or anything now, or even then? I don't know on the market what was available, if anything at all.
So Apple Health, but I'm not, like I mentioned earlier, I was never logging, I'm pretty good. I check in and check a trend here or there, but it's not something that I'm obsessing over. That's great.
I know sometimes you can just get caught up in that minutia and lose sight of what your goal is. And so this is my question, did Dr. Peters ever get mad at you for not logging? Because I remember as a young type 1 just getting railed for not keeping a good logbook.
No, I think she accepted it. I have attention deficit disorder. I'm going to use that as an excuse. But yeah, it was always just, from when we were, from back then, yeah, you remember those like dog-eared corners and like blood-stained pages. They were gross. They were really gross. Now these apps are so much cleaner.
Yeah. Yeah.
They'd have like food on it because you're pulling it out with meals and testing blood sugar. So it's like blood and food, some combination of blood and food on all these, every single page, and chicken scratch writing,
Yep.
and in the middle of the night in a dark room. Yeah.
I haven't thought about that in years. I mean, I think it's the benefit of people. I always tell our community, it's the best time to get diagnosed. If you're going to have diabetes, have it now, because those tools were not available then. And it's so much easier and just more user-friendly now.
Yeah.
I'd love to, at this time, just open it up for questions. We've been answering some of the questions in the chat box, but if people would like to just ask you directly, I would love to, for the last 20 minutes or so, have the group ask you questions directly.
Great. Have at it. Ask me some tough ones.
So Gary, if you look back at your career in the Olympics, I mean, you achieved a lot. I mean, your record is just fantastic. If you had the technology we have today, how different would you think your achievements be? Or do you think it was really down to the individual, hard work, training, attention to detail? How much do you think the technology would have helped?
It would have helped a lot. I probably could have swum more events. I couldn't swim more events because of the type 1 diabetes. That I would get these huge spikes with the competition, and it would take me hours to reel in my blood sugar levels and get them stabilized before I was able to compete again effectively. Now we're talking at the best athletes in the world, right? People that don't have diabetes, that are dedicating every waking hour to this pursuit. You have to be able to do that better than them, because you have to make up for the fact that you have diabetes.
And what about the speed of onset of the insulin? Do you think if you had gone to inhaled insulin, or if there was a really rapid acting insulin, that would have given you an extra edge? Or
so I love, the answer is yes. And so I was really excited when Freza came out, and when I went, and I was like, this would have solved my problems, addressing exactly what I just said. But I started using it, and within a couple, within months, I started coughing. I burst blood vessels in my eye from coughing so hard from that stuff. So yeah, it's faster insulin, but I need my lungs to swim. So that's a trade-off that isn't gonna work. So I don't know if that would have helped or if it would have hurt a lot. So yeah, I mean, some things work for some people, some don't work for others. So I don't know. So much of it is individualized. Some people love pump therapy. I had it available to me while I was training, and I didn't choose to use it. But definitely with the CGM, that definitely would have changed things. Smart insulins or super fast acting injectable insulin, even what's available now are fast acting insulins are fast, but is so much better than what I was using at the time. So I think that I could have done more if I had those technologies while I was competing and training. Mostly with the training, more than anything else, because the results, the competition, so much of it hinges upon like the training leading up to it.
Hey, Gary, you mentioned that you're not a pumper, you're not into it, but the technologies that have come out in the last couple of years with the closed loops, I wonder if that might have you change your mind and trying it out.
Yeah, I've seen the graphs, the charts and stuff. It's hard to argue with results, right? So yeah, that has me reconsidering. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, that's been talked about for such a long time. And so, you know, that now that's finally here, yeah, I'll keep an open mind in any of this stuff. And like I said, I mean, when you see those flat line things that go on and on and on, like an A1C that's perfect. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to argue with that. And yeah, I'll definitely try that out.
Gary, if you're interested in trying out any of that, I know a good research institute.
See Jordan.
There was a oh, go ahead.
Ask.
What's your favorite breakfast food?
Favorite breakfast food? I'm a simple eggs kind of guy. I like mine over easy. A solid protein, you know, you don't have to dose too much for that. And you know, I do like fruits in the morning too, a little bit of fruit. So yogurt. I'm a yogurt. I love yogurt. I think I like yogurt more than ice cream, in fact.
Well, then what's your favorite dessert?
You know, I lived in Solvang for a number of years, and I have to say that my guilty pleasure is some of those Danish pastries that they've got up there. I cannot say no to them every once in a while. But it's funny, it's one of those things too, maybe because it's flaky and light or something like that. I don't have to give myself a whole lot of fast-acting insulin. Maybe it's like healthier carb or just like, but I mean, if I eat like 3 pieces of Halloween candy, it's like through the roof, but I can eat an entire Kringle from one of those Danish pastry places, and it's like half the insulin.
Gary, one of the questions in the chat box was, when you were younger, did you play any other sports? And if you did, which ones were the ones that impacted your blood sugars and how?
So I was diagnosed relatively late, and I was a swimmer. I had specialized by the time I was diagnosed. And so, yeah, I've since, after being diagnosed, done plenty of activities. I did a couple, like an Olympic distance triathlon and a handful of sprint triathlons. I play basketball. I play tennis regularly now. I play 2 or 3 times a week sometimes. And so aerobic, anaerobic, there's some consistencies, whether you're based in water or you're on land. But yeah, when I was younger, I played every sport. I mean, I loved skateboarding. I loved, you know, I played tennis. I played soccer, basketball. I wanted to be a basketball player in middle school, and that's yeah. I've always been physically active. Enjoyed sport.
I guess my follow-up question is, what can't you do? That's quite impressive. Another question we had in the chat box was, is there anything in your response to your diagnosis that you feel you benefited your training for the Olympics?
Any response?
Is there anything in your response to your diagnosis that you feel benefited your training for it says 2020 Olympics, but I think that was the 2000 Olympics.
Yes. So I've heard people say, oh, is it a benefit? You know, it makes you more disciplined or more organized, diabetes, you know, like I've heard these arguments. Like the thing that I think was a benefit to me was that it put the Olympic Games in perspective, that it's not that important, right? Like when you're facing potentially life-threatening illness, and and these concepts of mortality and what is life? Why are we here? That perspective that, hey, 21.7 seconds in a 50 freestyle is pretty cool, but is it really changing the world? Is it not? It's not really changing the world. And people, athletes that are wrapped up in the Olympic movement have dedicated so much of their soul, their being, every waking hour to this pursuit, this goal, this dream that is very noble, representing the United States of America, winning, being the best in the world. After the diagnosis, I was like, it's a swim. It's sport is entertainment. You're not ending hunger in Africa. You're not, like, there's more important things to life than this. And so I think that kind of perspective on mortality and point helps take some of that do or die type of pressure. There's still a lot of pressure. It's very intense when you go to the Olympic Games, but maybe in addressing that, maybe it alleviated it a little bit.
That's a really sobering perspective. That you're right. I mean, from our perspective, it's just so incredible that you got to that elite athlete Olympic status. But at the same time, dealing with diabetes, that's just a different beast as well. And so it's so incredible to hear. We rarely get to see both sides of that, and so it's still so inspirational. We have about 5 more minutes, and so I just wanted, if there's any last minute questions, I'd love to, if you want to get it in, I'll stop talking.
I have one.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the coldest water you swam in, like without a wetsuit or anything?
I'm a wimp when it comes to cold water. I grew up in Phoenix. It's the desert. It's a dry heat, but the nights get cold there. And I used to have a swim practice start at 4:30 in the morning through high school, and would swim for 2.5 hours before school every morning, 5 days a week. And during the winter months, like February, there would be icicles hanging from the backstroke flags, ice on the starting blocks and stuff like that. And, they said that it was 78 degrees. They kept the pool at 78 degrees, but it was all the time 78 degrees. That was the coldest water. I mean, the temperature-wise, I've swum in the Pacific Ocean. It's down in the 50s without a wetsuit. But I tell you, the coldest that I've ever been was those morning swim practices in Phoenix. That was just, and maybe because of that, I've never wanted to test it to see how cold I can go. But a lot of, polar bear plunge is a thing, I think the participants that I see doing those polar bear plunges look like polar bears. They've got that seal fat blubber on insulation stuff. I don't. I've gotten skinny, so I think I'd be shivering just at the thought of it. What about you? What's the coldest water you've been in?
The ocean in my swim trunks and a rash guard.
Yeah.
Really bored. So.
In the wintertime or in the summertime? Because it's not that cold in the summertime.
No, but it's still pretty cold.
Yeah.
Gary, do you think the days you swam versus didn't swim changed the absorption of the insulin after an injection? Do you think the cold water or anything affected that?
I didn't. The variable wasn't. I didn't notice it. I mean, the pool was always between 78 and 81, 82 degrees. I wasn't experimenting with the temperature. I would assume so. There's some shock. I would go into shock, I think, jumping into freezing.
Gary, you talked about doing a swim series for type 1. You have any kind of places you're planning on going? For example, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Olympic City, USA.
Tell me where you want me. I mentioned that Dave Arluck and his swim clinic business, he, prior to COVID restrictions, was doing close to 400 swim clinics across the United States a year. And so that's pretty much every city. I'm piggybacking off of the swim, like the traditional swim clinic that he's doing, and attaching diabetes swim day. So I've got 400 locations to choose from once things are back up and running. So tell me where you want me, and I can get close anyway. Are you in Colorado Springs?
Yeah, we're in Monument, just north of Colorado Springs.
Okay.
But we've actually hosted fitter and faster clinics around the area.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there. I did a lot of training camps up Colorado Springs.
I'm sure.
Has your pre-exercise routine changed since then? Like, is it still the 1 bar, 2 bars based on whether it's anaerobic or not, or?
Yeah, gosh, the exercise that I'm doing now is so different than the training that I was doing for the Olympic Games, but similar in that I'm not, trying to exercise with my blood sugar over 200. When I go out and I play tennis, I'll play for 2 hours, and it's not really it's super intense, if it's a sprint type activity, but over a longer period of time, there's some aerobic work in there. So I'm finding that maybe just the consistency of that being my go-to exercise, that I've kind of locked in what I need to do. There's a sausage breakfast sandwich that I have religiously before I exercise. So it's a little less healthy than Olympic training, but
you got the fat in there to slow down the metabolism, right?
Yeah. My tennis partners are like in their late 70s. One guy's 83. So when I say that it's not very intense, it's they can hit the lines, and I run like a retriever. I'm trying to hit it back.
When you were tracking down that 1 bar, 2 bar formula, were you keeping a book then, or was that like, how was that trial and error process for you?
Yeah, I was not. I never kept a log. The bar was created by this world-renowned veterinarian. He was like an orthopedic surgeon that would treat Kentucky Derby winning horses. Like if a $20 million horse breaks its leg, this was one of a handful of surgeons that people would call. And he developed this omega formula really early, before anybody I had heard of talking about omega-3s. This guy was heavy into it in the mid-90s, and developed this bar that was, made to assist these racehorses in the recovery from surgery, because he identified that inflammation was inhibiting the recovery so much, and that so much of what we were consuming in our diet was having this inflammatory effects. And obviously autoimmune disease is an inflammatory issue as well. So my coach connected with him when I was at Berkeley. He was based in the San Ynez Valley, And so this was something that as athletes we were turned on to, not because of the diabetes, but I found in my pursuit of kind of figuring out sliding scales and stuff like that, that this product had such a better nutritional balance, such better effects, in the outcome of my training performance, that I don't think I could have done it, because at that time too, like in the 90s, you didn't have a variety of nutrition bars. Power bar, right? You know, in the 90s, it was Power Bar. You had a Power Bar, and that thing is like the worst thing that you could possibly, like, it was like sugar bomb, like basically, right. You fast acting carbs, you know, and a lot of them, and so yeah, to come across something that, because we were just constantly eating. I mean, when we're training 8 hours a day, when you're not in the water, you're either eating or sleeping. I mean, it was like, that was pretty much the routine. So like, even this was like something that we would just like feed on while we were training and stuff like that. It worked.
Yeah, I played water polo, and we had, we were in the pool 5-6 hours a day, and I was a late onset like you. So it's a normal childhood. And I remember those Power Bars, like 45 grams of carbs, and it's like all sugar.
Yeah.
What was the name of that bar again?
So Platinum Performance is the name of that. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, the flavoring is like vanilla, and there's like a tiny little bit of honey or something in it, but it's all natural kind of stuff.
Do you know where you can still get them?
Online.
Okay.
Online.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, this it's a family-run business up until not too long ago. I think that they just the father, the veterinarian, he died just a couple years ago, and so I think that the company changed hands, but still the same formula, and yeah, really good product. And I don't get paid to say that. Just know the family, and the bar. Couldn't have done without it.
Yeah, I found it pretty interesting. The reason I asked about the closed loop thing is I work with the institute also in a lot of their artificial pancreas trials, and like one of the things that we've discovered is like how to ramp down insulin before, like a couple hours before a workout, but then like depending on what you're doing, like you go for a long walk, and I've discovered that like if I don't have something that is really slow release before I do that kind of exercise, then it's like the glucotabs that are in my pocket are gone by the time I get back, right?
Yeah,
it's not fun.
I am doing some hikes these days up some steep hills, and yeah, definitely experience that.
Yeah, right on. Well, thanks for your time. I actually have to go, so thanks for having me.
Yeah, pleasure to connect. You still play water polo now?
No, bad. Broke my wrist, so I can't really throw, and messed up my knee. Too much ice drinking. So now it's just this land-based sports. So.
Yeah, keep playing sports.
Yep, that's the goal.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Rob. Well, Gary, I think we are out of time. We are just enormously grateful for your time, your expertise, your inspiration. This has just been so fantastic. We cannot thank you enough. Thank you for the advocacy work that you're doing as well, and your support of Sansom Diabetes along the way. We're so grateful. We hope to cross paths with you again in the future.
I'm always at your service. Sansom Diabetes is an incredible organization. Dr. Kara, thank you so much for the work that you do. And I remain a huge fan of yours and the entire team. Kara, it's great to see you. And yeah, thanks everybody for
thanks, Gary. Keep well.
Hanging out.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Gary. Take care. Have a great night.
Thank you, Gary.